Zoning Commission. Tonight is Wednesday, the 26th, and 2022. By the clock on the wall. You're not getting me, okay. Here we go. Oh, that's right. I'm looking at the minutes from the 26th. Let me move that. Okay. Tonight is February 23rd, 2022. Time on the wall is 6:03. We are hereby convened to consider matters that have been duly posted in accordance with state law and local ordinance. The first matter up is citizen and public comments. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak at this time? If so, please queue to the south of the building. Matt, do we have cards, and do we have OpenGov comments that you'd like to put in the record?
No one has submitted any cards. I believe we have one OpenGov statement, and it's related to agenda item number, I believe number 8. Number 8. So would you like me to summarize that or read it? Or
let's get to that. Let's get to that comment when we get to that item.
To that item, perfect.
If that's acceptable.
Certainly is.
All right. Moving on to item number 3, which is consider approval of the minutes for Here's where the January 26th. Here's where the 26th date comes in. January 26, 2022. And we have an update to that was it's mailed out within sometime this afternoon.
Yes, and I did realize, and I'm sorry that Commissioners Frick and Commissioners Boozer were not included in that. So I have it up here on the screen. So the changes were pointed out by Commissioner Reitz. I left off something in this condition regarding dark sky lighting. And then I added, Commissioner Reitz had a question if these were indeed the conditions that were discussed, because there were some additional conditions discussed at the council meeting. But these were, I did listen to the recording, and so these were the conditions discussed. Some were voluntary conditions proposed by the applicants, and then these last 3 were discussed. Do these all look okay to you, the last 3, from the discussion?
Yeah, I just asked you to check that.
Okay, yeah. So those were the only changes.
So I guess, does anybody have any other edits or comments? And I guess Commissioner Boozer and Frick, you need more time.
Oh, and commissioners, if you could just speak like this to your mic, because we're not picking up everything. So
Okay.
With the mask on, you have to get real close to the mic.
I think I'm good.
There appearing to be no discussion or conversation regarding the minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from January 26, 2020?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item number 4. This is, we open up a public hearing.
And just, Chair Huerta, so we did discuss this with legal yesterday, and they advised that we could open up the public hearing simultaneously since the items are related, so that the public could, get their comments in, and staff can present on both items if the commission is amenable to that.
Understood. We are now opening the public hearing on item number 4, a public hearing to consider a request for a special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district under section 150.101 of the Land Development Code at 6405 Brodie Lane. And item number 6, public hearing to consider a request for a special use permit for alcoholic beverages to be sold in a restaurant for on-premises consumption under section 150.103A of the Land Development Code at the same address, 6405 Brodie Lane. Public hearing is open. If there's any comments on that, or do we have staff presentation?
Yes, just one moment. All right, Commissioners, so this is the 6405 Brodie project that was discussed at the January 26th zoning change that was approved by council action on February 1st, and then codified at the meeting on February 15th. So the zoning has been changed from single family to neighborhood commercial. It is the same development, same conceptual plan. These are the special use permit applications. One, to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district, and the second being to serve alcohol for on-premise consumption.
I understand that from the time that we last touched this, three things have happened. One, the property is now neighborhood commercial. Rezoning has happened. Secondly, there is a traffic study that was not available to us when we considered it last. And third, it appears that the conceptual plan has been modified or updated, which we have a copy of now. So those are the three changes. Are there anything else that has changed to the world since January 26th with relation to this property?
And I would say for that conceptual plan, it is from the change, the major change in that plan is the lane to make it a right turn in only, and then right exit only, based on the study from and the memo from their traffic engineer. So that is the major change to the conceptual plan. And also the legal representatives for the Trivianas, we met with our council and discussed some issues related to the actual who would be issued the special use permit. So there's really two issues. So there will be a ownership group, the land ownership group, which will be, the majority will be the Trivianas, majority holders, and they will be issued the special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial. Even though there are three separate eateries, one being Didi, the second being Vera Cruz, and the third is yet to be determined. There are three separate eateries that will have their own separate health permits. They're their own entities, but the special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial will actually be issued to the land holding company. Now, the second issue is, because the commission discusses this a lot when we're issuing special use permits for specifically for alcohol. So there's a fourth building on the premises, on the establishment of 6405 Brodie. That fourth building is the cafe. The cafe is where beverages will be served, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So there will be a separate, the applicants have indicated, for their own reasons, for their own legal protections, a separate LLC will be created for the cafe, but it will be the same owners. The same owners of the land management group will also own the LLC, own and operate the LLC for the alcohol. And we've also consulted and looked up the TABC rules, and in terms of our code, the Sunset Valley Code, with the 49% that alcohol sales may not constitute over 49% of gross sales. When TABC is calculating sales, they calculate that based on the location. So it would be all sales for 6405 Brodie, for all three eateries and the cafe. That's how the total gross sales would be calculated, not just the cafe, if that makes sense.
So I have a question then, and this is a question that we've encountered numerous times on these permits. Right now, the name of the applicant is Justin Triviana and Thomas Triviana,
right?
Not any particular business.
Correct.
It will be held individually by Mr. Triviana, Elder and Senior.
No, there will be. So and feel free to speak, Mr. Triviana, but yeah. They do not own the property yet, so.
Yeah, so basically, there is a land and building ownership. So all the improvements, the land is owned by a group. Justin and his wife and my wife and I are the 80% owners, and Vera Cruz, the Express family, will be 20% owners, and we will own all of the buildings and the land, and we take full responsibility. for state law and honoring all the laws with Sunset Valley. We've been advised by council that it is prudent for us to have a separate LLC that operates the cafe because when you serve alcohol, and yet we're committed to do things like train staff to not serve minors, et cetera. So we've got really good counsel for Texas alcohol beverages. So it is the same group. The name of the entity, Justin and I are the managing members. And so that there will be an entity, a name. And so we're actually been working with the folks from Veracruz. We're in the final stages of finalizing those documents.
So the issue that presents for us is the issue that we've faced numerous times that staff probably has told you about. We can issue a special use permit in the name of the applicant that comes to us. The application that I'm holding that we've noticed
Understood.
says Thomas and Justice Tribbiano. We can do that tonight. If you want us to hold and give you a license in the name of the corporate entity, when you know the corporate entity, we can do that.
So, well, it needs to be the entity that's going to own the land and the improvements, I would think, right?
I am not going to provide you legal counsel. You've got
Michael,
more
did you
than
wanna-
adequate counsel with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael Whalen on behalf of the applicant. It was my understanding that the special use permit would run with the land like any zoning. We can't close on the property till we have, we don't own the property, obviously. We're waiting to get this done and permitted in order to do so. My understanding was a special use permit, since it's in the zoning section, like zoning would run with the land and be attached with the land. If that,
We raised this issue on a number of occasions, and it's always been, it goes with the name of the applicant. So if there's, we can ask counsel if you're correct or previous counsel has been correct. I'm saying I don't know the answer.
yeah.
I believe
guess,
you, but
I
I'm
guess
going.
the other nuance might be that if not to the land, then the variance or the special use permit would attach to the site plan that has been submitted. That might be the answer that manages this question, because we're not seeking to have the special use permit apply to anything other than what we've shown you already.
Right. And again, I'm raising this because in the past, we've, and again, we have relatively new city council, and then I'm talking about council as an attorneys as opposed to city council, that has come on board within the last year. But even then, I think within the last year, this issue has come up with one of their representatives of the Knight firm.
And BOA variances, for example, attach to the site plan, which is why either the special use permit would run with land. I think it probably would make more sense for it to run with the site plan that's been submitted.
I understand,
That would make
Mr.
more
Whalen.
sense.
I'm going to turn to our city's expertise and look to staff and council and ask what we can do there.
So
So I'd like to ask Veronica, our city attorney, the Tribbianas are managing partners of that corporation. The alcohol permit and the special permit tonight are listed and noticed to the Tribbianas. So Veronica, is there an issue if they are the managing partners and it's issued to them and the corporation is under their name?
Okay. Veronica Rivera, Assistant City Attorney for the city. Got it. Veronica Rivera, Assistant City Attorney for the city. So in terms of the application for the SUP, it will be the Tribbianas. If they set up a different LLC, as long as they are majority, they can do an assignment. And so it's still running with the land. So that can still take place.
That's the answer then. Okay. And again, the issue is what we're trying to do is not issue a license that then you have to come back and amend or fix or something. We want it to be clean from the get-go. So normally there is a list of requirements for meeting a special use permit for, at least on the alcohol side. And staff, are you prepared to talk about those and how this is compliant?
on the alcohol,
Well,
or do we want to talk about the general?
we can talk about them both if you wish,
Okay.
if you've got that. I saw the memo.
Yes. Hang on. So, and again, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, because you've been on this commission for a long time, but I believe this is the first time that anyone has ever applied for a special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial, at least in the records that I
This is
dug through.
from what I can recall, and I've been sitting on this commission for 25 years, I guess, 20 plus years, so.
So, so for the restaurant, there is not specific criteria, but the general criteria, of course, are applicable to both the restaurant and the alcohol. And I address these, staff address this in the memo. There's the appearance, size, density, and operating characteristics of the proposed special use are subject to the effective compatibility and buffering standards. So a lot of the buffering standards would need to be discussed in detail and addressed during the building and construction and site development permit process. But the applicants are going to the Board of Adjustment 1 week from tonight to ask for a buffer to the landscaping variance, the landscaping buffer on the north side of the property. So what is the Galt property that is city-owned? So they're asking for, they only have a 25-foot, their conceptual plan only shows a 25-foot landscaping buffer, where the code requires a 100-foot, because it is still zoned single-family, even though the city owns it, and the plan is to change that into green space, the Galt property. So that the Board of Adjustment will hear that case 1 week from tonight. So the zoning commission recommendation would have to be subject, the zoning commission recommendation to council would have to be, the condition would be, the board would have to grant that variance in order for it to comply with criteria A. So I can address any of these others. D is the traffic, which we provided the applicant's traffic study and their recommendations.
I think with a right in, right out, it's good. Overall, I've got no problem with the study. There was a line in there that stretched credibility. It said that people coming from northbound were going to go to Mopac to come back up, the people from the north side, right? So to say that somebody at Home Depot or Academy will go north on Brodie, across on 290, down on Mopac, across on William Cannon, and back up, as opposed to going south and making an illegal U-turn, does stretch credibility. But I am not here to challenge the traffic study. It's sealed, and that engineer has to live with it. We don't. But again, I do read these things, and I do catch stuff that's raises an eyebrow.
I noted the same thing. Just
I think most reasonable people would. So,
Commissioner, I would just say, if you want, the traffic engineer is online. I think there might have been a misreading of that comment. If it, either after I speak or later, you want to ask him, I would encourage you to do it.
I think overall, we're going to accept the traffic study after, we understand what the numbers and trip volumes is probably more important, but I would not, I'd not be surprised if this increases the number of traffic collisions with people making the illegal U-turn south a little further south on William Cannon.
And it was also noted that it's the same thing when when they want to go south. As they're turning right, they have to go up and do a U-turn, which at least that intersection, that's where Lowe's is.
Right.
Where the stoplight is, and that is a big enough area to turn around, but still doing U-turns at an intersection.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I agree, Commissioner.
That's one of the concerns, Commission, that we will continue to discuss through. One of the options thrown out is petitioning the city of Austin to put a no U-turn sign there.
They work very well. And anybody that stood on the corner of La Madeleine and watched this no U-turn sign on Brodie will tell you they work about as effectively as a screen door on a submarine. So, but nonetheless, we digress. I think the alcohol sales, the volume is another big one. And based on the type of eatery, I don't think they're going to exceed the 49%. And that's something that the applicants had raised in their original presentation to us. Is there any concern about that?
Yeah, there's always a concern. At the same time, I don't have enough information to question it that thoroughly.
Okay.
But I think, the reassurance is when TABC, again, is calculating, its total sales. And so you've got three eateries and then a cafe. So I think, again, we can't know, for certain until they potentially would come for their first renewal and we see those gross receipts, but. No.
So commissioners, from a safety standpoint or from an assurance standpoint, the alcohol sales are going to be limited to one of the particular buildings, which would make it easier for us to audit. It is considered an entire area because it's issued to the address, but we wouldn't have to be auditing 3 different businesses, 3 different alcohol sales to ensure everybody's under 49%. So we've taken some precautions in that way also.
Okay. So there's, Matt, in the past we've asked if staff has done a look. Do they have any licenses anywhere else?
So,
And is there any compliance or regulatory issues?
no issues with either applicant. I did a search, but I could not find where, so I could find no compliance issues with the applicants.
And Dede is not affiliated with Dede's in Bear County, are you? Okay, different entity. I looked based on the ownership group, and then just to be thorough for the administrative record, what is it? Is it Polina? The Polina Group? Polina Group? They don't own any liquor licenses, do they? Or any of their subs? Okay. So we've got a clean track record.
And I was going to just address one more for the alcohol, for the specific criteria for alcohol. So again, number 2, do I have it pulled up? Yeah. So number 2, we again run into the issue. Council would have to make a special modification for this condition. But staff's recommendation being that the Galt Life Estate, which was purchased by the city back in 2009 with the intention of being zoned as green space, it was purchased with green tax funds, so that change hasn't happened yet, and the property is still, Ms. Galt still resides on the property, but the Galt family has indicated support for the project. So, but council would have to modify. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I wanted to bring one additional item up that was in the staff report. Staff mentions the applicant working with the Drakers. I'm not sure if Mr. Draker is in the audience, but he wanted me to specifically say that he does not feel the applicant has worked well enough with the Drakers. And so I'll let him address that. We were under the impression through all of the meetings that have occurred that there is work that continues to be done by both parties. And I'll let Mr. Draker address that. I did want to bring that to your attention because I told Mr. Draker I would bring it up after a discussion with him.
And there are, voluntary conditions that the applicant has offered.
And I was, okay, Mr. Draker, Mrs. Draker, would y'all like to address the commission at this point?
Commissioners, please just remember to speak up. You gotta get into the mic.
Sorry about that. I keep forgetting, Matt.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Draker, this is an invitation to come at this point since we're at that point in the proceedings.
And we are going to keep public comments to 4 minutes. The commission can always allow more time, but I will be trying to run a tight meeting. So.
My name is Scott Draker, 759 Oakdale Drive. I think it's important to take the time to vet this properly. I wasn't quite sure coming in tonight why we were having a hearing for a restaurant, singular. Now I'm learning that there's a difference between a restaurant and an eatery. Can someone point me to our code that explains the difference between a restaurant and an eatery?
I can pull up the definition of restaurant, but we actually already discussed this with the applicants and when legal. So
Was that
with
in
our
a public-
code,
Was that
restaurant-
in a public work session? I was not notified.
Yeah, no, so we're discussing that now. So,
Okay.
let me pull up the, so, an establishment whose primary business is selling food for consumption at tables on the premises or for takeout, as determined by at least 51% of gross sales, and establishment is not defined in our code. And so our understanding is that the location, 6405 Brodie, that will be owned by that ownership group of where the majority shareholders are the Trubianas, although there are 3 separate eateries, and there's the cafe, 6405 Brodie constitutes an establishment.
So then what you're saying is there could be a new eatery added at any time?
No.
No, because that would overdo the impervious cover that they are applying for. There's specific parameters already within that site plan that is limited to that site plan.
What would be
So-
what would be the prohibition about putting a food truck in the existing parking area?
There would be none, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There would be.
right.
And the city doesn't have,
Well, the only prohibition would be the parking spaces that are being granted. If the food truck were to go into some of those parking spaces, obviously now there's not enough parking spaces. That's one. It can't go on the property. Well, I don't think the food truck counts against impervious cover.
and
Let me-
Sylvia,
let me
they
look
would,
at-
they would have to apply for a special use permit to operate a food truck in a parking lot, because that is using the parking lot for something other than a parking lot.
Right.
So, when we have a tent sale, when Home Depot has their tent sale, for example, they have to apply for a permit from the city to operate that tent sale because it is a use that is not a parking lot.
Yeah, we've made Home Depot come in for their hot dog stand.
Okay, fair enough. So what about adding another eatery inside the cafe?
They would have to go through the standard permitting process.
Why?
That would be,
It's just an eatery, the restaurant's already
no,
there.
there's a
It's no
permitting-
additional
there's a
impervious cover.
There's a permitting process for that. So if they needed to do remodels for kitchens, it happens in our shopping centers. That a store will go out of business and the shopping center will decide, okay, we're gonna split
Okay,
this.
but as long as it's conforming, you can't reject a permit.
That would be correct, and that is some flexibility that's granted under this type of permit, much as the shopping center is allowed to change owners in space. If one of the tenants chose not to continue, the applicant is able to fill that with a different restaurant or eatery.
So I guess the bottom line is, I don't understand why we're disguising this. If the intent is to have 3 eateries, why don't we approve 3 eateries? As opposed to 1 restaurant.
If somebody were to look at this, to see how far somebody lived from the place, right? I believe TABC goes from property line to property line. Is that correct, Ms. Rivera?
Yes, sir, it's
Okay,
it's
so,
for
so
the
that
property.
parcel is considered the establishment for TABC purposes. And you can have the business, the establishment be broken into 3 or 4 little segments, or one big one. But for TABC purposes and alcohol purposes, this is considered to be where the business is, and you count feet from that for purposes of TABC. I think what we're doing is, at least this is what it looks like staff is doing, is using the same rubric for this purpose as TABC does for the alcohol permits, which is once you have a parcel that is being used for the establishment, for the selling of alcohol, or in this case, the establishment is established for the sale of food, the whole thing counts. And they can have 3 or 4 different deals. They don't need to come back in for each individual
Right.
eatery. They don't have to come in for each different, for the various restaurants. It's going to be the ownership group that is holding the licenses in this instance. That was a discussion I had at the very beginning, trying to figure out how they were making that work. And
So I still don't understand what's preventing a future owner from tripling, doubling, whatever, the number of eateries.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the applicant is coming in and has submitted as part of the SUP a site plan, and the site plan will hold them to what's on there. If there's going to be any addition made, they have to come in for, if they want to make any additions, they have to come in with an application to change that site plan, and it would start another process again. So no additions, it's only the 4 that are being discussed right now because they're part of the site plan.
So if they want to change the cafe, future owner wants to change the cafe and convert that from all beverage sales to 3 eateries, the site plan would prohibit that without.
Correct, because it's only 4, there's only 4 that are there.
There's what?
There's only 4 that are shown on the site plan.
Well, 4, one of them is the cafe.
Correct. So the cafe cannot expand without.
Well, I'm
site
not
plan coming in.
suggesting it would expand. I'm
Or-
suggesting it would just change use.
And ownership, if they sold it, the special use permit is tied to the Trubianas and eventually to their company. So if they sold the property and another developer or another owner came in and wanted to operate a restaurant, they would have to come back to the zoning commission to ask for a special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial with the site plan and all, everything. So.
Okay.
the same is true with the alcohol license as well. And again, that's why I was pinning down the names and the ownership at the beginning, because I saw that potential out there.
Okay. Part of the packet or part of the application, should be able to find it here pretty quick. The proposed use will not have an adverse effect on the value of surrounding properties nor impede their property development. And the staff's response is, a majority of residents on Oakdale support this development and property north. However, the neighbors directly to the east at 759 Oakdale, oppose the development. That's a resuscitation of the facts, but it doesn't explain or talk at all about the impact that this development will have on the value of my property. Is there a report, an appraisal, or anything that we've obtained that will support this claim that this development will have no adverse economic impact on the value of my property?
Staff, I haven't seen one. And do we require one?
No and no. No, we don't require. And honestly, it's a fine balance between what is the Draker's property and the surrounding property owners and the applicant and the current property owner's right to develop their property to the highest and best use. So from the standpoint that best planning practices have been employed here, going up and down Brodie, what is developed, traffic counts, et cetera, we don't foresee a negative impact to the property. And that statement is based on, again, actual planning practice, discussion with the neighbors, and the favorable input of the majority of the neighbors around.
My final comment is on the alcohol use permit. If I'm not mistaken, this will be the first and only instance in Sunset Valley where, if approved, we would have alcohol sales adjoining residential occupied and zoned property. I think that's a horrible precedent to set. I would urge you not to approve the alcohol special use permit.
I think, does the Holiday Inn have a special use permit? I believe that was one of the criteria that they had when they were building it.
The,
Holiday Inn
no,
Express.
the current restaurant that they have does not have, but there have been multiple, because that restaurant has been
Right.
Estancia and yeah, so there have been special use permits for alcohol issued at that location.
What about that property at Stearns Lane? Weren't they gonna sell alcohol?
Stern? You mean the corner?
No,
Yes.
No.
that's an
no,
office
that's
building.
office building.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Then you have the barn across the street.
Okay, the Holiday Inn, Small Point, is on highway commercial property.
Not
This
neighborhood.
property is on
Neighborhood.
neighborhood.
right.
Good, that is a good
So
point.
that's a big difference, big distinction.
Yeah. All right,
Are we allowed to address Mr. Draker?
I believe, yeah, we're allowed to get any information we need. We're allowed to get any information we need, so if you wish to ask a question of Mr. Draker, you certainly can, Commissioner.
I would. Is that all the items that you addressed with them, or is there any additional items? One thing that I was concerned about, that I thought of after the fact, was noise level. So are you satisfied with noise level agreements with regard to the establishments?
No, not at all. After y'all's last meeting regarding this zoning change, my wife and I met with the Tribianas. We asked them for several things. They rejected everything that we asked for. We asked them to push the development up closer to Brodie Lane, farther away from us. They rejected that. We asked them to minimize parking, reduce parking, and push the development up in place of the parking. They rejected that. We asked them to move the 100-foot buffer fence to 200 feet. We asked them to widen the 100-foot buffer to 200 feet. They rejected that. We asked them to move the fence to the 100-foot buffer line. They rejected that. We asked them to build a vegetative screen at the 100-foot buffer line, and they rejected that. We asked them to reduce their hours of operation and to consider closing one day a week, preferably Sunday. They rejected that. We still have noise concerns. We don't believe that the noise ordinance is a tool that will help in this situation. We have ideas of our own that we think would be parameters. We don't know how to control noise other than not to make it in the first place. So I wouldn't know how to tell them to mitigate noise, but our noise ordinance does nothing to protect us. So I think that there's, I guess, criteria, perhaps is the right word, that could be used to, as a matter of, in the future, calculating whether the noise is a nuisance. And we're still concerned about water quality. Our well, which is in the path of their runoff, Miguel, you will probably remember, those of you that have been here long enough, I don't recall exactly when, but 15 years ago, Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District did some dye studies, and they injected a dye, and they used our well for one of the study points, and they injected dye in our well and then measured the time in which it takes for that dye to show up in Barton Springs, and their report cited our well as the superhighway to Barton Springs. So the water quality in that area is very sensitive and very critical.
So was this list,
And I have a few ideas on that as well.
was this list, I mean, you recall that my apologies, Matt. You'll recall that our function is to make a recommendation to council, and then they decide on things. Was this list, was this presented to council prior to the zoning change being approved?
Yes.
Okay.
So one of the issues, Commissioner, that was explained to the council and also to Mr. Draker is we've committed that at every step of the process, both at the site plan and at the building process, because those are the parameters council placed on us, that we address these issues. So the applicant voluntarily said he would engage a noise engineer, and there's also additional screening with trees and landscaping. And then there may be the potential for other architectural barriers, whether that's a fence, whether that's artwork, whatever that is, to ensure that sound is traveling back toward Brodie and less toward the Drakers. So those are all conditions that council placed that we will be going through in both the site and the building permit process.
So there's still two more processes that the Tribianas have to go through, aside from this one. The building process, the site plan process and the building process. Is that correct? Ms. Carrillo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's, okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Draker?
So two comments, short comments to that. First of all, with all due respect, when you all take action and you vote to pass it on to council, you're, in a way, you're handcuffing council, because council has to have, if I'm not mistaken, a supermajority to override whatever y'all approve or deny. And
That's only for,
Board of Adjustment.
well, no, the supermajority is only for, and I don't want to get this wrong, but it's only for
Denials.
Denials.
denial.
Or it's a no.
Okay, well then one of our council members misinformed me. The other point is that, going back to what I said earlier, that specifically about noise and engaging a sound engineer, that's all wonderful and I really appreciate all that. My concern is what happens if it doesn't work? You know, I want to see something that says, this is the threshold, you're meeting the threshold, you're not meeting the threshold. If you're not meeting the threshold, turn it off. It's as simple as
And-
that.
and none of- and
We
none-
have, as an example, we have a state law concerning water quality that I think provides a format. State law says that the water coming off your property can be no worse than it was before. So we simply go out there today, pick a day, and take a noise reading at the property line. Whatever that level of noise is at the property line is the threshold. So going forward, if the decibel reading going forward is in excess of what it is today, then they're not in compliance.
Okay.
I mean, we have a noise ordinance.
Your noise ordinance doesn't, it says after 10:30 at night, they can make as much noise as they want all day long.
That's the ordinance.
Well,
That's the law.
but the law doesn't say they have to build this
Okay,
here.
I'm gonna stop the exchange. This is not, we're not here to litigate the matters. We're here to get at the information and try to come up with a decision.
Yeah, and the applicants haven't spoken yet either, so they
Right,
did want to speak.
I'm aware of that, Matt. Is there any other questions for Mr. Draker before we let him go and call up Mr. Whalen?
I would like to say, I do recall in our meeting that, that the Trivianis did agree to have, cut their hours shorter.
That is correct. That's one of the things I was
So
going to point out. We did
I don't know what
that.
happened between, Mr. Draper said that what was
Yeah,
he referencing?
I don't know, I just don't know enough about Mr. Draker's background to know if he's run a restaurant before and what are the things that are needed in terms of having sufficient parking, having hours, at least. We had a proposed midnight. He had asked us to go to 10 p.m. We compromised, that you were correct, Commissioner, and reduced it to 11 p.m. We can't go any lower than that, frankly, and make this an economically viable establishment. But and doing some of the other things that he suggests really does economically make it a less desirable and less something that you're not going to end up having Veracruz and Didi's here to do because they won't be able to make it work. We've really tried to cut it, and I think if I run through my presentation quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've done to appease and accommodate the Drakers and Sunset Valley, because these folks are dedicated. They've been knocking on everybody's doors. We've got one person who's not happy. We are doing everything we can to try and satisfy that person. I don't know that we're going to achieve that. Our contact information is still available to Mr. Draker. If he would reach out, as we've done to him once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, we're prepared to meet if there are some other conditions other than the ones that make it completely impossible for us to proceed. But we believe in meeting. But I can quickly go through this.
You mentioned the presentation, but you also mentioned quick, so.
It's going to be quick.
All right.
So the first thing is, I want to emphasize, we've seen this before. We have not changed anything. What you're going to see in a moment, when I came here before and asked for a recommendation on zoning, I told you, please don't vote for this zoning unless you're prepared to vote for the same site plan, special use permit. Everybody remembers that because it was a bit of high drama. Regardless, that's what the things we've changed, as you pointed out, Commissioner, to make that accommodation. Here's the site again. Everybody knows where it's at. It's got H-E-B and Lowe's across the street. If we go to the next slide, this shows you the support. Mr. Justin Tribbiani has gone around and knocked on a lot of doors. You can see where Mr. Draker lives, the yellow. He is the one person who opposes it. The blue is everybody who has affirmatively signed on to support it, affirmatively. The others are people that we either haven't been able to communicate, but they haven't voiced any direct opposition. If we go to the next slide, this is what we previously showed you. Nothing's changed. It is city manager and others who have spoken are correct. This is all we can do on this site because of impervious cover. And the special use permit is going to attach to what we are showing you. We wouldn't be able to add another building or do anything more. The next slide is a planting slide. We added, again, Commissioner Frick, to your point, we added some trees as an additional buffer. We moved the fence 25 feet into our property, giving Mr. Draker basically an additional screening where he has, I think, he stored some materials and cars and some other things on the fence line there. We've created additional trees there for him as a bit of a buffer, and then we have the fence. And again, we've also added trees elsewhere throughout. If we go one more slide, the last slide shows some of the types of trees that we have been talking about planting. And Commissioner Frick, if I got a call from Mr. Draker, one thing I would ask if he called me is I'd say, do you want to sit down and talk about the types of trees and where you'd like them planted? You know, because I think we'd be prepared to engage in that type of conversation, because I think that would be helpful. There's some beautiful species that our landscape architect tells us would do well in that area. So that's kind of where we are. We intentionally selected a low-intensity zoning category. We intentionally selected one. And one of the conditions to granting that low-intensity zoning category was what adverse impact it had on a neighboring property. That was one of the findings that needed to be made, and that was made in our favor. We know that there aren't any other restaurants or bars in this low-intensity category, but one reason is we're creating a unique opportunity. It's an outdoor setting with very small structures, very low intensity. We have provided what we believe is enough parking, and most importantly, you only get one TABC license. There aren't going to be multiple bars on this location. We have given, and city legal can confirm this, only one permit holder is allowed at this, quote, location, 6405 Brodie Lane, and they will confirm that. We also have, if you want to hear from our expert, we do have the TABC lawyer, Jack Martin, on the phone, who can answer any question about TABC. But we're cognizant of a couple of things. We want a family-friendly opportunity. We also want an opportunity where people can have a drink and sit outside with their friends and family, and we think we've created that in a unique way, and I think it's going to frankly be a wonderful gateway to Sunset Valley, one that your own policy, vision, and marketing documents reflect on and are seeking. We've got lots of experts here, much better versed in water quality, with Blaine Stansberry here, our engineer. Our traffic engineer, Bob Akhtarani, is online. Jack Martin is online with TABC, and our landscape architect is also here. Thank you all very much.
Fellow commissioners, is there any questions for the applicant or the applicant's representatives at this time?
Yes, I want to pursue the noise issue because when it's mentioned that this is going to be an outdoor venue, I don't know if the Rolling Stones are going to show up and rock us out till 11 o'clock or 10:59 or whatever. That will probably be the biggest issue he will have, is the noise level. When I look at his list of items, I sit there and go, yeah, but really, I mean, if I was the neighbor there, I would be most concerned about the noise. And just to tell you about noise, because we have the commercial right behind us, the garbage trucks show up and they make noise and they beep, beep, beep and all that kind of stuff. But if he's going to have bands playing every night till 11 o'clock and they are going to be interfering with his enjoyment of his property, I think that needs to be addressed. And when you came here before, I expected you to work in good faith with him to address all his issues. I see the way you've presented it. At the same time, I ultimately come down to, I think what he's ultimately getting at may be, and this is my own opinion, the noise issue that may come about. So if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure.
And the water.
Pardon? And water.
So we, after there was a recommendation, we've met with the Drakers 5 or 6 times. I think you're aware we increased the fence from 6 feet to 8 feet to 10 feet. We've added the trees. We did dark sky lighting, so that lighting was an issue for row N. the single biggest issues that she reiterated twice was security. We've agreed that we'll secure the site, put a security system, the whole site. So we thought we were there numerous times. We met the night I flew back. I was visiting my daughter in California, flew back for a meeting, Justin and I, with the Drakers. Yeah, sorry. Flew back to meet the night before the city council meeting. We had what Justin and I thought was a very positive meeting. Indeed, Scott is right. He asked us to move the buffer 200 feet. It destroys the site plan. It doesn't work. It's not feasible. He asked that we reduce the parking. That parking, you don't want to have an issue. There's no street parking. You have to have adequate parking. So we explained that. So Scott actually in that meeting said, your project, quote, is brilliant. I think your project is absolutely brilliant. I left that meeting, he said, look, I'm not sure how we're going to go. It depends. I sent an email to our civil engineer to talk about water runoff, which I happen to know we're going to approve that. We've committed to approve the runoff. I expected at the city council meeting that the Drakers were going to support the project. That's how positive we thought that meeting was. Obviously, we misread things. Scott still feels pretty adamant. And so we, as far as your sound, we've said we will hire a acoustical engineer to work on that. This is not a big band venue. I don't want to say that we would never have music there, but because conceivably you may have someone's acoustic or whatever, but this is not a band venue. There's no place to have big bands or any of that sort of thing. And most importantly, we're not giving up on trying to get, I don't know that we'll ever get, particularly Scott, to sign off and say, I like this project today. That our goal is, we don't want to have a neighbor that is irritated by what we're doing there. So we will continue to work now through the entire entitlement process, platting, et cetera, with the Drakers. And it's our goal and hope that someday they will say, you know what, we were wrong. This is brilliant, and it really has been wonderful for Sunset Valley. So we're committed to that. We don't want to enter into some kind of confrontational kind of thing. That's worst case scenario. Life's too short. So we continue to try to do that. We actually did offer, Scott, we gave the list and said, look, from the list of things that our landscape architect, if you guys have special trees, we've talked about the buffer, because there's a 100-foot landscape buffer from their property. And we're putting all of the things under the trees. That's the reason we couldn't move the thing up to Brodie. Brodie's a loud, noisy street, right? So we're under the trees, where Betty had her home, because that's what makes sense for it all. So we tried to explain all that. I thought we did a good, effective job. Like I say, apparently we hadn't. But we've even said, look, we're going to have some kind of a divider that doesn't allow people to get into that landscaping buffer. And we'll invite you to participate in that process. So it was in my view, it was a very positive kind of collaborative meeting. But once again, we either misread it or there was a change of heart. So I just wanted to say that we're committed to continue to work with the Drakers and hope that someday, if this project is approved and gets built, that we can get them to be one of our best customers. Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the questions that I have is on the noise ordinance. I know that construction isn't allowed before a certain time, that kind of deal. And I know that amplified music is cut off at a certain point, no matter at what decibels. But during the intervening time, there are limits to the amount of sound that can be produced at the property, they can be measured at the property line. And I know that the police do have a decibel meter that they use. I unfortunately live near a place that has a lot of live music in residential areas. And very often they're garage bands that aren't very good. And they're very loud and play very late. And when the electricity turns off, the drunken tabernacle choir kicks in. So the police have come out to actually measure, and I know that they do that. But what is the sound levels that are allowed in between the morning and the cutoff period at a certain point?
So I have the noise ordinance pulled up. Okay. So this is what's prohibited between 10:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. There's a special permit process for,
But, by the way, that's where Commissioner Reitz
yeah,
can stop the recycling and solid waste.
Yes,
It's got to be
yes.
after 7.
yes.
I've complained, and they, 7 o'clock, they're there.
Right, so really that's the only, so you're asking, Commissioner, so this is what's prohibited during those times, but you're asking what is allowed during, I guess, the day? Is that what you're?
Right, and I'm looking at this, okay.
Oh, the city has its own.
Yes.
This is the Sunset Valley Noise Ordinance. So,
So obviously, amplified music is allowed between 10:30 and 7. It's not considered to be a inherently noise-generating activity. So at that point, we go to the decibel levels, right?
I believe that's
property line.
above, right? Or excuse me. Hang on. Definitions. So here, yeah, so there's the definitions, and then there's examples of unreasonable noise, which is prohibited.
There it is, and
That, it was number 2, cause any unreasonably loud or disturbing noise by any musical instrument, radio, sound amplifying equipment, explosive, or by any other means.
That's from up until 10:30?
yeah,
That's between the hours of 10:30 p.m. and 7 a.m.
you shall not do that. yeah.
Cannot.
Right. And what I'm saying is that there's another provision of the sound code, not a sound ordinance, that says even between 7 in the morning and 10:30, there's limits.
There's limits, right? I believe
And
it's.
that's
can
what I
be-
was asking about.
I'll ask you a question. If the noise ordinance change, if the noise ordinance is changed based on their usage, are they grandfathered?
No,
Okay. That might be,
at least that's my answer from what I remember. Matt, Ms. Rivera?
The question again, please.
If the sound ordinance, the noise ordinance is changed, and let's say we change it so that anything after 9:30 has to be electrical, amplified music has to be cut off at 9:30.
but yeah, it's a good example.
Would these guys be grandfathered because they started operation prior to that? And I thought the answer was no, they have to live with all current ordinances.
No, that would not be an ordinance, that would be grandfathered, not
Okay.
noise.
So that's your answer,
Yeah,
Commissioner?
I appreciate that.
Sure.
I agree with you that noise is a considerable issue, having, lived my experience. But I also have noticed that the noise ordinance is getting tighter and that the police department's getting better at measuring those instances.
I agree, because we had issues with that when we moved in, and I think one of the line items there was due to our complaint. And so I'm bringing that up. It's nicer if they had an agreement, and I felt comfortable with regard to what they agreed to and how it worked. That's kind of the good faith that I was anticipating on all potential issues. I don't preclude Mr. Draker with having other issues that may come up as he lives next door to the establishment. that's one of those things. At the same time, can some of his concerns be ultimately addressed through the city council as time goes on?
Well,
And that's
or through the building
that's somewhat of
process.
what my commentary to Mr. Draker.
Or the building process or the permitting process.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I think those issues, they're valid issues, they're genuine concerns, and I think they're valid. But they don't seem to me to be tied to the special use permit
Yeah.
as much as they are to the site plan or building. For example, the moving of the fence, the buffering, those things are planning and building issues, not whether or not they're serving food or alcoholic beverages at a particular location. That's my own thinking, but I'm willing to listen to anybody else's comments.
Would you mind putting the site plan back up there? Okay, now, the 10-foot fence, which has grown from 8 to now 10, was that ever right on that property line, or was that always meant to be where it is now brought in?
It was originally a 6-foot fence on the property line with the Drakers.
That's what I thought.
We moved it in to 25 feet where you see the dashed line.
Yeah,
And then we went to 8 feet, and now we've gone 10 feet, again, to try and help with the sound and any other, visual issues that might exist.
so let me just ask you something. If, looking at that plan there and the arrangement of the buildings and the open area and all that, that fence, I would think, a 10-foot fence might even cut down on the noise of Brodie. And if all of the music, the speakers are projecting towards Brodie,
Yeah, absolutely,
you
absolutely.
wouldn't have,
Yep.
you wouldn't have the noise heading, coming towards the Drakers. And if you were to put up a small stage or something like that, would that be in that area? It's more or less the open area to the right of the restaurant there?
If there were, it would be probably this seating area. These are Eateries, they're
Mhm.
there's no place to go. The cafe, there's beverages and all that. So it would probably be here facing out towards Brodie. But we've already committed that if there's any sound, this is not meant to be a bar, bring it down and all that. But I don't want to have a prohibition, so you have to be.
Yeah, you need a mic.
So,
Okay.
And we did hear that, so, just to recap for the record, in case you're either at home or for the recording, the applicant's representatives are saying that the southern covered seating area would most likely be where they place any amplified music, and if any, and then the amplifiers would be pointed away from the Drakers toward Brodie. And we have the landscape architect.
A landscape architect, yes.
Yes.
This is Cameron Campbell. I just wanted to point out one thing about the weather patterns of Central Texas. We have southeasterly winds in the summer months, in the spring as well, and northwesterly winds in the winter. Never do we really, very rarely have a due west wind that would blow, and actually a northwest wind that would blow towards the Draker's house. So most of the time, in the summer months, the wind is going to blow the sound back towards Brodie in the summer. In the winter months, when we have our cold fronts that blow in from the northwest, that's going to really kind of blow south of them if the sound is where it's proposed to be located. So it's just an observation that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. Sound does carry through wind.
Thank you.
Exactly.
So, commissioners, is there any more that we want to explore on this issue?
Well,
And
for me, it
and
would be Scott's other issue, which was the water quality.
So water quality, just a moment there, Mr. Frick.
Okay.
I was I was just gonna, the public hearing is still open, so if just make
Yes.
sure if anyone else I don't think anyone else wants to speak, but,
Okay.
and I have not received any cards.
Thank you, Mr.
Let me check open town hall real.
Thank you, Mr. Lingerfelter. In the meantime, while he's checking open meeting, can you call the water quality guy? And is it you, Ms. Stansberry, or is there somebody else on call?
No, I'm the civil engineer for
I
the,
thought that was her, right,
for
yes.
the water.
And it
quality.
is Ms. Stansberry, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I didn't recognize, not this city council, but the one previous, he was wearing a mask as well, and I'm bad with masks sometimes. So, John, you had a question?
Okay, well, what I would say, is a topographic map ever been done on that property so we can actually see how that water moves?
Yes, when the project first started, there was a full survey done, including all ground topo, and it flows pretty much in the direction of Brodie towards the rear property line at the Drakers. The contours are, pretty lined up vertical on that map. They also had a geologic assessment done as well, which showed no features on the site.
Do you have an actual topographic map that shows those levels and flows?
Yeah,
and
it
things?
was included in the backup
In the original-
Appendix B from our zoning.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've just pulled up Appendix B. Let me know what,
Yeah, it should be on that site. It's going to be probably hard to see on this screen.
There
Is
was-
it
That one, the
first
second
slide?
page is the existing conditions of the survey right there that shows Mrs. Grubb's estate.
so page 2 or?
Yeah,
keep it on
page
it?
2, go one more. Yeah, so if you
Okay.
are able to zoom in, you could probably see those contours, kind of vertical, almost vertical
Right.
lines.
And if I remember correctly, the applicants also provided I remember doing the math on the charts that showed the pollutant loads and things. So that was also provided to us, John.
Oh, okay.
That's
I don't know
right.
what
I
page
guess
that
I
is,
missed-
though.
I must
I'm
have
sorry?
missed that.
I don't know what page that is on your original app.
Yeah, it was the last page on that application. There-
And is his well shown on that?
Yes, the Grubbs' well is located where the north covered seating is. Yeah, page 1. Oh, the Draker well,
Draker's well.
excuse me, no, the Draker well is
Oh,
not shown.
okay.
It was just a survey of the 5-acre Grubbs tract. Yeah, so I have done some refinements on the preliminary water quality plan since we last spoke to include rainwater harvesting for the majority of the buildings as another treatment in addition to the vegetative filter that would be the secondary treatment as it the 200-foot distance between the core area and the Draker property line. And then the parking lot, as discussed before, will be treated through retention and re-irrigation. And the areas that we are providing for that exceed what is required. Furthermore, the detention that will be taken into, that will be utilized in that meadow in the center of the parking lot will actually reduce the water quantity runoff from current conditions by 25%.
Now that, I have a hard time with that one, because that area is surrounded by asphalt. So it's all going to run from that parking lot unless that parking lot is laid such that it either angles away some or does something, because otherwise isn't everything going to run right into that middle area? And are you saying that would be 25% less than it is now?
Right, so
I don't see
everything,
how that could be possible.
everything would run into that center area and pond, but the parking lot will be up higher than natural grade a little bit, so we would have discharge pipes going
Oh,
under the
okay,
parking lot that would
okay.
release the water back towards the east at a much
That-
slower rate than what's running off now.
All right.
So it would run, okay, I see what you're saying, right, okay, got it.
Well, I say that because we do have a council member who, and that is his specialty. And he's, let me tell you right now, he is going to go over that with a fine tooth comb.
Yes, sir, he will. And we worked through a lot of that with the WellMed project previously that I was involved in.
Oh, right,
And
okay.
the watershed development permit will provide all of those details. And
Okay.
I'm happy to talk details. So.
I'm just saying that just to make sure that you're on your best game there.
Oh, yes, sir, I will be.
Well,
Yes, he is an expert.
But
Okay.
that's good, but that's good to know, again, that the watershed plan is coming up and will be reviewed by people that have more expertise than us. Okay, any other questions
Thank
for
you.
the water quality folks before we let her go? Okay,
I guess my only thing was I was wondering what Mr. Draper, or Scott's issue was with, if you're concerned about runoff towards your place or your well being compromised with runoff, or? I would, yes, sir.
My concern is not so much with the volume of water, but naturally that is a concern. I do believe that that can be dealt with, though. But you do have to understand that this is a property that's got like 1% impervious cover now, and we're changing that to 20-something%. Would you, Blaine, this water quality method of treatment, would you categorize this as a retention re-irrigation? Is there can I speak for you? And you correct me. So a retention re-irrigation captures the rainwater, captures the dirty rainwater that is contaminated from oils and dirt and other things, that the primary focus is the water that's in the parking lot. And it captures that water and then re-irrigates that water over the property. And then that water doesn't go through a filter like your water at home might go through a filter to reduce any kind of sediment or other contaminations in it. What it does is again, please step in if I misspeak. But what it does is it uses the land and the vegetation on the land to filter the water. So the land is thought to act like a filtering sponge, if you can imagine that. And so when it takes this contaminated water and sprays it back over the land, the vegetation, and I believe it has something to do with nitrogen and that sort of stuff, but it's absorbing these pollutants and then leaving the water clean as it runs down to the creek and into the aquifer. Well, who here is an expert on Del Rio clay?
well, we all live on it.
You are all experts on Del Rio clay.
We live on it.
Because you all live on it. And what happens when it rains? What happens when it doesn't rain? What happens in your yard? The yard cracks, your ground cracks. And then when it rains, the ground swells up. And when it rains, that Del Rio clay will take a certain amount of rain and then water, and then after that, it's like putting a sheet of plastic on the ground. No more water will go into that ground. No more water will be filtered by that ground. So that water coming after the fact is going to continue to run over the ground until it discharges someplace. One of the creeks, one of the other aquifer features. In this particular development, they have 100 feet in the back, that landscape buffer that we've been talking about. And they're using that 100 feet of land to filter the polluted water from the parking lot before it comes onto my property. Okay, yeah, please help me out.
Okay, and again, I don't want to get into a litigation of the merits here.
Well, he asked me what I would
And
say.
I understand that, and I let you answer.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, the back and forth, we're gonna get a response, and then that's gonna be the end of the exchange.
Well, what I was
okay?
really trying to say is that we have a city councilman that is going to be really watching that the water very carefully, which should give you, I think, a better feeling that at least you have an expert on council, because that's not our job, really. I don't.
I appreciate that. I brought it up earlier in response to a question that y'all asked of me.
Right, and we appreciate you answering our questions. And again, please, stand very short and to the point.
Short, absolutely. The city has adopted, the City of Austin criteria for development over the recharge zone. This is 100% non-degradation requirements, meaning that the treatments that we put in place will not allow any pollutants off of that site other than, the minimum would have to be what is coming off now. So I can, there were some discrepancies in the things that were being described. We will meet the city standards. We will exceed the city standards, and that, like Commissioner Frick said, will be reviewed with the watershed development permit. So.
Thank you. And thank you for your brevity. Okay. So we've talked about noise, we've talked about the water, and as I've said before, these are the issues, and they're real valid issues. They're valid issues, they're concerns. Do we have any other questions of either the applicant or any other members of the public before we close the public hearing and begin deliberations on our recommendations to council? And Matt, I am moving closer to the mic. My apologies.
Yes, and just as a reminder to the public and to the commissioners, we've had no additional comments on open town hall, so there were no written comments received by the city or open town hall comments related to these two public hearings. And just as a reminder, these are both the public hearings. This is the public hearing for the restaurant special use permit and the alcohol special use permit.
Right, that's correct. We've opened to both. Hearing no more questions for the applicants and the general public, and having no more comments, I'm going to close the public comments, or the public hearing, agenda item number 4 and agenda item number 6. I'm now calling up agenda item number 5. Our recommendation regarding a request for the special use permit to operate a restaurant. And item number 7, our recommendation to the city council regarding a special use permit for alcoholic beverages. So now is our deliberation. This is where we chat amongst ourselves, commissioners. Comments, thoughts, insights, motions, anything is available to you right now.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, council.
Veronica Rivera again, Assistant City Attorney. Just when you decide to make motions, please make 2 separate motions, one for each item, agenda item.
Wisely requested, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, council, commissioners, did you hear that? We're
Yes.
making a motion, 2 separate motions.
Yes, and just to follow up with that, so if the commission so chooses to recommend approval of the special use permit for the restaurant, that would be the special use permit a recommendation for approval of the special use permit for alcohol would be based on approval of that special use permit for the restaurant. So it's a,
On the advice of council, and now what staff said, I think let's take agenda item 5 independently. So we're on item number 5. We're going to take item number 7 after item 5. So item number 5 is the restaurant. Should we let these folks sell food there?
You want to leave the discussion? You want to leave the discussion?
Well,
That's what I thought we were doing all along.
well, no, now it's, well, based on everything that we've heard in the public hearing.
Exactly.
uh,
It's right there on
Does
the
anybody have any-
plan and everything.
Does anybody have any comments? Anything they'd like to say or a motion to be made? I mean, I think we've got all the facts in front of us. The question then becomes, do we want them to be able to sell food on the premises?
I believe we should.
Yes. I think we should too. The reason I was just hesitating there is thinking of the Drakers again. If there are restaurant odors and stuff coming off, just to make sure that there's plenty of ventilation and air circulation and that whole thing taken care of, which you have to do anyway, but maybe go the extra mile there so that.
Which is not something we covered in, it's not something, turned it off accidentally. That's not something we covered in the public hearing directly. However, our landscape, their landscape architect gave us the information that winds are prevalent from the northwest blowing away from the breakers. And then at other times of the year, they're coming in from the south, but generally away from the breakers. So,
Or it doesn't go to them.
Yeah, the odors would be wafting away.
Yes, and I live in kind of the same method, and that's true. I
Okay.
believe that's true.
Okay,
Okay.
so any other?
No, that would
Okay.
be my only other.
I think what the Drakers have raised are very valid concerns, and they're good points. However, I don't think that they're germane to this process in and of itself. We needed to talk about them. They were raised in the public hearing. It's our duty to listen to our neighbors and have that public hearing. That's part of our job is,
Well, because we put ourselves in their place.
yes, and it's our
What
duty.
would I do, you know?
It's our duty to represent, to think of the people. That's our job. But there are two processes that need to be gone through, both on the permitting and the building, that I think are more germane than whether or not you should sell food here. So I'd be willing to entertain a motion to recommend to council that we allow a special use permit to operate a restaurant within the neighborhood commercial district under the cited section of the Land Development Code at this location.
So moved.
I've got a motion
Second,
and a second. All right, any more discussion? Hearing none. Everybody everybody for it, say aye.
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 Everybody opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. All right, we're going to close item number 5, open item number 7. Same discussion. This one is alcohol permit. Anybody have anything to say? Anybody have any other input other than what we've heard in the public hearing at this point? The question then becomes, is should the applicant be granted a special use permit to sell alcohol at this location?
Yes.
I'm willing to entertain a motion that we recommend to council that they grant a special use permit for the sale of alcoholic beverages under the appropriate code at this location.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All are ayes, motion passes. Okay, that concludes items we're up to item number 8 now. And that's a discussion and possible recommendation of the city council for approval of the proposed regulations for short-term rental. Now, before we do this, those of you that were here for items number 1 through 7, if you wish to skedaddle, you may. This is called being merciful to the audience. Okay, moving on to item number 8. We have the short-term rental ordinance that is before us. In the interest of weather and time, I noticed there was not a red line provided to us by the commission's, sorry, I practiced before a commission, by the city staff, not commission staff, which would require us to do a line-by-line comparison to what we had before. Matt, we can have one, but we don't have it right now, right?
I mean, I can pull up the red line from the city attorney. I did present you all with a clean version. Oh, go ahead, Sylvia.
Well, we don't have a prior ordinance regarding short-term rentals, so this is a brand new ordinance. The red line Matt would bring up is the internal document between the city attorney and staff. There's not a whole lot in there.
Yeah, what I was asking for is the last time we touched this to now, the last version to this version, and it's my understanding we don't have it. So in light of that, I would recommend that we get that and that we table this item until we have a comparison of the two versions, what we're holding now and what we had. And I'm willing to entertain a motion to that effect, that this be tabled until we get the documents compared.
We're happy to table, but I'll remind the commission that at our last meeting, we had a little bit of a legal snafu. Staff had brought forward an ordinance and then legal wrote a memo at the very last minute. So we almost scraped that one entirely. You will get a bloody page, but in the interest of time and the weather, we're happy to table.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat that? What was the problem?
So in our last discussion, staff had made some recommendations and brought forward, and then legal wrote a memo that said, oh, no, you're a general law city. You can't do some of those things.
Yeah,
and so we went back to the drawing board and began our research and came up with the ordinance that's in front of you that has passed legal muster in some cities and essentially captures everything that commission wanted us to capture as it related to short-term rentals. But you're right, you do not have a comparison document in front of you.
And I'm willing to go forward. It depends on what you guys want to do, so.
Well, I can table it. I don't know, nobody's indicated that there's some, compelling reason why we have to not be comfortable with it. And if you prefer, I'm okay with that. I have to say, I looked at it and I just had really one question. And since we don't have sections, it's hard to point it out, but it says revocation and appeal. In section B, a permit holder may be subject to revocation of their permit if there are 3 or more violations. And so kind of the discussion, since I'm not keeping any secret, around our house.
What page are you on?
The page 6 or 7, there is at the top.
Specific criteria at the very top?
No, it's revocation appeal.
It should look like this. It looks like Commissioner Frick's is a little different, so I'm gonna have him share with me.
Share it.
So there we go, sir.
I've got it pulled up as well,
Yeah, it's
although this is the new version, so.
So the issue is right there, if there are 3 or more, okay. So
And
what is your concern,
well,
Commissioner?
I really kind of question, because people can call up and complain. That's not necessarily a violation. And so, you have got this situation whereby maybe a neighbor is causing issues, et cetera, et cetera. They call up, complain, the police don't issue a violation. So I got a technical point there with regard to how it would operate. It's really something that I'd like to have addressed, and if we need to wait for next time, because that was my only thought with regard to this thing.
I will-
Complaint versus violations.
Right.
And you know
How
how the
about
police go up
Yeah.
and sit there, and if everything's calmed down, there's no violation. But if they show up once, so, kind of work on that a little bit.
So addressing complaint versus.
Violations,
versus
that
an
kind
A
of-
actual
written violation
Right.
or a written
Uh,
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
citation
and
or
coming-
written.
So give it some thought. I mean,
Okay.
that was about the only thing that, because, we're worried about, I mean, my concern is if you don't like it, you just call up and complain.
3 times.
3 times, and
Right.
boom, you're out.
Right.
That doesn't seem right.
Correct.
But if you have
Correct.
the, si- if you have the situation whereby
Coming-
the police don't want to
Yeah,
issue a
I understand,
violation.
yeah.
So,
So Sylvia,
Yeah.
before you jump in here, staff, coming from a regulatory environment, both at the Public Utility Commission, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, other places like that, a violation is once it is found that there has been wrongdoing. A complaint is simply an allegation of a wrongdoing. So I think if we could write into either the definitions or somewhere earlier into
Correct.
this section, something saying that a complaint is
And
a
that was
complaint.
the intent.
I'm sorry, Sylvia?
We need to define complaint versus violation, but yes, absolutely. A violation is where the finding is they are in violation and PD issues a ticket. And specifically because it ends up with Board of Adjustment as an evidentiary hearing, it absolutely has to be a violation where they have been issued a citation.
Okay. So if staff could make that change and then get us,
the red line.
the red line. And actually,
So-
if there is no red line, we're still gonna table in order to spend a little more time at the next hearing on this, next meeting on this,
Okay.
rather than give it short shrift.
Yeah, so and just to
Sure.
clarify, and to get Sylvia, all of us on the same page, so this document is kind of the proposed regulation based on the flow chart, based on all of the, I believe we've had 4 discussions on this, so, but yes, we can,
Yeah,
we can provide a more robust,
I do understand how the red line may be different, I mean, because it may be difficult, because the last one was scrapped.
right,
And this was
Yeah.
created from whole cloth. Okay.
I have to say, I'm a little bothered by this, the one registered statement that we got saying that our whole thing is creating an inconsistent legal argument as a mistake and other blah, 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 could be inviting litigation and all.
This is a
So-
comment by Joe Luis, I believe, or Joe Lewis.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
guess we
sh-
could, counsel, have you looked at that comment on OpenGov?
No, sir, I have not, but in terms of it being vetted, it has been vetted by legal counsel. It was not myself, it was your city attorney who has been looking at this and who had prepared the memo as well. So I will make her aware, but it's been vetted, so all ordinances are,
Yes, if you
subject
could
to
just kind of look into the
Yes, sir.
allegations
Yeah,
here
I-
and see if there is any
and
issues.
again, if you can repeat who was it from?
It
get you
says
a copy
Joe,
of the,
Okay.
I'll get you a
Joe
copy.
Luis,
Joe
Yeah,
Luis.
I'll provide legal with the
Okay.
copy of the statement, from Joe Luis.
Thank you, Matt. Okay.
And just as a history lesson, because we've been looking at this for a long time, that is why it's no longer and correct me if I'm wrong, Sylvia, it is not a permit. They will not.
Correct. It's
They will.
a registration.
It's a
The
registration.
Okay.
And that is.
yes.
Yeah.
So we've discussed our top of the iceberg kind of points with staff. And we talked about a motion to table. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded to table item number 8 until our next meeting. All in favor, say aye.
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 All in favor, say nay. All right, unanimous, motion passes to table. Brings us to item number 9, which is the motion to adjourn. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
I've got a motion.
Second.
And I've got a second. Any discussion on this one? There's never a discussion. All right, all in favor of going home, say aye.
Aye.
All right, with that, we
Maybe you
conclude.
don't have a discussion on a motion for adjournment. Point of order, don't mind it.
Point of order.
We are closing this meeting of the Sunset Valley Zoning Commission at, it looks like 7:41.
7:42.
7:42.
It's a little slow.
You stand corrected.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Commission.
Thank
Be
you.
safe going home. And by the way, take a look at our new website. Matt did an awesome job.